Hi everyone, this is Priyanka Schoeneck, and welcome to the People Things podcast. The People Things podcast is all about creating a safe space and giving a platform to talented and genuine individuals to share their perspective on work, life, and anything that affects us as human beings, and talking about the human condition in the best way possible, being the best version of ourselves. So, thank you so much for listening to our podcast and tuning in to our podcast. Today, we have a very special guest in our episode 4, and this guest is Renato Andrade. I have worked with him for about 3.5 years almost from two different geographical locations, so Latin America, South America, and Europe. I was in Europe and he was in South America. And we connected, we built a really good connection. And one thing that brought us close together was our understanding and drive to create awareness about mental health and mental well being in general. Renato has studied psychology, so he is a psychologist. He is very well versed with the topic, he's well read, and he is also very driven to create awareness about mental health in the workplace. Today, we have him with us to discuss how our mental health is affected by our workplace. What are some of the positive experiences that he has made where, let's say, a company did a very good job, or a team or an environment that he was working in did a great job in having this understanding for mental health conditions. Also, we will be talking a little bit about the dark side where it was not good and what amplified these mental health conditions or mental health situation that one might find themselves in. And last but not the least, we going to rate some of the things that companies do that are mental health positive and which can really be looked at as tips to take forward and also execute or implement in your specific organizations. I hope that you enjoy listening, and I hope that you can tune in and share your opinion with us about this topic that is very, very important to be discussed in today's world. So, welcome to People Things, Renato. Passing over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this lovely introduction. I feel special. So, I'm Renato. It's very nice to be here. I feel like it feels so fancy. So we met. I think we worked for like 3 years and a half. That is a lot of time. But yeah, so let me properly introduce myself. I'm Renato. I am originally from Brazil. I currently reside in London, UK, lived in Berlin before. And that's, I guess, where we got really close as people because we were then in the same city and working together, the same company. I guess I worked my entire life with HR and with human resources in big companies, smaller companies, doing a little bit of everything and jumping here and there. Formally, more in what is called like organizational development and learning and development, and then as an HR business partner. But I've always had this mental health thing, and then I've been through my own tough experiences with mental health that kind of moved me to be a little bit more focused on how can I also help other people not go through what I went through. I'm not going to be able to necessarily change how their brains work, but I can try to influence the space around them to be a little bit better, a little bit more accommodating, right? So that's where mental health has been appeared in my life from my own experience. I'm also a psychologist, but I'll always tell people that I'm a terrible one because, like I couldn't even notice on myself some signs of stuff. And I was like, what kind of like I studied this, like what's going on? So it's I guess sometimes we have to go through the experiences to really feel moved to do something for the world, right? So I've been doing that. And so mental health has always been a topic in my life. But formally I've been working in HR, and yeah, I guess that's it.
No, thank you for sharing, Renato. I think you make a really important point here. For a lot of times, you have to like live the experience, get through it, to really understand how debilitating certain mental health situations can be. Right? So I appreciate you sharing that, and I also think that We did a nice series of workshops, right, where we worked before, and I really loved that you as a facilitator were very vulnerable, and people could connect to that, and we were also like creating this safe space for people to not be judged because of it, because and I think the world has come quite forward when it comes to understanding or accepting mental health conditions, but there's still a lot of stigma associated with it. I don't have any data to share that, but it's just the feeling that I have, when talking about it and using certain terms, depression, anxiety, and all of that, in a genuine way, people feel a little bit scared still to do that. So I'm really happy that we're speaking about it today. And, just from what you mentioned, right? I at least feel that my mental health is influenced a lot by my work. So, my journey has been leaving my home country, moving to a different place, establishing myself there, and finding work, finding colleagues that you can connect with, finding new friends, and all of that. But I also realized that, a lot of how I feel or how my mood is depends on how my day at work has been, right? So, for me at least, it's a major factor. I wouldn't say that if I'm on vacation and I'm not like working and things like that, and it's not because the workplaces have been extremely bad or something like that. It's just something that I felt was affecting my mood a lot on how I perceive the day to be. So I think it would be beneficial if we talk about our experiences. Renato, do you also feel that way, or about work and mental health? What is your take on that?
I absolutely agree with you, and I absolutely feel the same way. I think the way that we are seen as valuable human beings in society is if we're being productive, right? So work takes a big part of our lives. So a lot of us feel validated at work. So work is what gives us a sense of, a lot of times, of like a self, of a personality, or like I'm a valid person in society. And the good and the bad with that is, or the bad part of that is that because there's so much value attributed through work, anything that happens at work affects your mood, affects your sense of self-confidence, your sense of, like emotional stability, because you're giving the power to this entity that is there to make money. And some of them are trying to make the world a better place. Some of them are just really trying to make money with a fun idea. So it's like you're giving this place so much power over your life. And then this place makes decisions that are not under your control and are never going to be human in a way that they are, maybe this is the best decision. But at the end of the day, if money is short, they will fire people. They will let you go, right? Because that's kind of how the game works. And as we've seen in the last year, layoff after layoff after layoff, right, of so many companies because of whatever it is. So with that, all the living in this ecosystem where you kind of like give your sense of value to this player, to this place, to this institution, that wrecks you as a person a lot of the times, right? Because, and that's why, and I lived that. Like that was my entire life. Work was the first time that I felt seen and I felt valid as a person. It was the first time that I was like, oh, okay. For a lot of reasons, for a lot of things that I've been through in my life, for a lot of the lack of self-confidence that I've struggled or still struggle a little bit over all my years of life, because of this sense of never being enough or always something wrong that I've lived through my entire life. So you go to work, and then I've always overcompensated. Also, I'm gay, and I've always heard that I should overcompensate because the people that raised me, taught me, or lived was, because you're gay, you're going to have to overcompensate. You're always going to have to be doing more than the average person because they will look down on you because you're gay. So you have to do more than everybody. So I went into the workforce with all of this, with all of these things. You have to do extra. You have to, like, you're raised to be a human, like a professional. You always have to be on top. You always have to be on point. You always have to have a solution for everything. Like, don't bring me a problem, bring me a solution, and da 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 da. And then I went into the workforce, which for like a workplace, that is gold. A person with that sort of personality or experiences is gold, because the emotional exchange that you get from that is someone says, "Oh my God, this is really great that you did." It's you get addicted to it because it's your validation. You start to feel like you're existing as a human being, right? And then work becomes your personality, becomes who you are. Like whenever I'm introducing myself to people now, I try to not do this, although I did it today, but I try not to do this all the time. I try to tell a little bit about who I am and not what I do, because for the longest time I introduced myself as what I do, what I did. I have this role, I have this title, I have this thing, because that in the rules and the game of society and meeting people and when you tell them what you do, depending on which circles and places you are, that establishes a level of respect or a level of like a certain level of like comfortableness in the conversation for the other person or whatever, and then it's easier to then move on from there. And a person that has like a crippling fear of rejection as I have, that was also a great way to kind of like make sure that I was in a safe space. So that's kind of like, so that can be a lot of things, because it's never under your control working in a company, right? It's never under your control. You're not on the control of anything. And that's why you see people who are overworking and doing everything and just trying to make everything better for everyone and improving and jumping left and right and doing this and doing that and doing whatever, not getting not even near the same recognition than their peer who's doing the bare minimum and it's getting like a lot of praise, you know? And then you're overworking yourself and you're getting the same thing. So where is the fairness in this game? And in the end of the day, it's never gonna be fair, people. It's not gonna be fair. It's not a fair game. It's a game, it's a very subjective game all the time. It's a very subjective life living in a company. And trying to make objectiveness out of this subjective thing through the lenses of your own head, of your own anxieties, of your own thing, it's a lot. And then you break, as I broke, I guess, 2 times already in my life, almost a third time, but I was able to hold it on before.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for sharing your personal experience on this. I'd just like to add something to what you said, right? I mean, your work becoming your whole life and your whole identity. I think for people like you and me, we also moved, and all our friends were actually also from work. So what you always talk about is just work the whole time, right? While I understand that this is also, we give so much, this becomes our identity, we get validated and everything. We're also supposed to have fun at work, right? We're also supposed to also enjoy the experience and have this open mindset to embrace all of these changes and everything. And what I felt sometimes was that I would get overwhelmed by all of this, because although I knew that I could do a good job, and I was talking about like the early stage of my career when I moved here as well, I would always think that, this is so important that I would count my own way. So, what would you say about that, Renato? Because I think that you understand this as well from with me as a friend, right? I had all this potential and I did good work, but I always felt that I had to fight myself a lot to be able to kind of shine, and not take it that seriously and enjoy the whole process. So, what would you say about that?
I am right there with you in that sense, to be very honest with you. I think we are, it's a group of factors that impact that experience. So the biggest one being ourselves, as you said, the biggest one being our own limitations or the way we're dealing with life, right? So if someone's saying something to us, sometimes it feels 10 times worse if it mirrors or impacts a voice in our head that says bad things. If that person represents that externally, that is kind of like the worst thing ever. And I had one of my first bosses was exactly like that. So I had a very critical voice in my head that developed over the years. And this manager it was kind of like a literal representation of that. So I was literally working with my worst enemy, which was a representation of my worst enemy inside my head, right? So that was in a way traumatic and also healing. Traumatic because, it's like when I got literally bullied as a high schooler a few times. That is why are we, like, we're all adults here, like, just because I'm starting my career, why you're saying these things, right? Like making fun of me because I was, like packing some stuff and I would like miss something here. And I felt like I was in high school. So, and it's so interesting because I have this vivid memory of a few of situations because it's so traumatic. And the other way is healing, because when you notice that dynamic, you're like, oh, but then that's the problem, right? You're going to be fighting your inner demons 100% of the time, all the time, nonstop. And I really love this reality TV called RuPaul's Drag Race, and RuPaul, who's the host, always talks about your inner saboteur, that voice. And that is very real in all situations. It's that little voice that is telling you bad things. And that little voice is a survival voice. It's a survival voice that comes to you and talks to you in a way that it's not very like obvious, or it's very weird that this voice is yelling at you like that, because you feel like shit after hearing that voice. You don't feel good, but that voice is trying to tell you this is dangerous, and the way they can get to you is through that like aggressive way of doing. And then you learn to develop a better relationship with that voice, and then in comes therapy, right, to really understand and work through those issues and anxieties. But depending on the environment that you are, and I agree with you when you say, oh, I moved countries. I also moved countries, and moving to a new country and trying to understand and trying to set yourself in a new country while trying to understand how things work differently from what you were used to, even though you're in the same company, it's very different. So how do you adapt yourself? And then you start to become hyper aware of who you are and how the things that you do and the way that you do things impact the environment around you, because it's a different culture. You're coming from a different culture. And then you start to become hyper aware of how other people communicate based on their culture. But you know what the catch is? Because we are always trying to be better and do better ourselves, we are always overworking our minds to try to be one step ahead. But what happens is not everybody's doing it. Majority of the people are not doing it. And because people are not doing it, because we have this thing where we want to be better all the time, we want to be perfect, we want to, it's a survival thing. It's a way to guarantee non-failure. It's a way to guarantee non-rejection. So we don't have to do rejection. If I'm perfect, if I'm great all the time, if I'm doing my best job, I'm never going to have to deal with rejection, with people saying bad things about me. I'm never going to have to live externally those voices that are inside my head. But not everybody has that level of work, or it has that level of things, because maybe they come from a more privileged background, because they don't suffer as many biases as we suffer because of whatever it is. And then they start to say whatever they want, however they want. And you try to call them out or say, hey, this is not nice. And then they start to gaslight you and say, oh, you need to understand this. This is maybe da da da. And then you start to feel alone, which is the worst feeling ever.
Mm-hmm. I can totally relate to that.
Yeah.
I can totally relate to that. And also what you mentioned, right? Sometimes we want to predict the next step and we work so hard, we have all this drive, but sometimes the outcome is just not in our control. And so whatever we do, we're not going to be able to influence or change that. But this is our work ethic. We want to do it well. We want to put in all the effort. We want to put in all the hours. And so this has been really good to hear from you. I mean, this is not a very good experience, but it also makes me, I can connect to this. But for our audience out there as well, right? So you mentioned a couple of experiences which have amplified the negative side of your mental health at work. I'm sure that you also have some good experiences, maybe some good managers, maybe some good work environments that you've been in where, this voice was not amplified from your head,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's what really made the difference in my life in that sense. So those people are like friends that I have until today that are really close, because giving work was my personality for the longest time. that's where I found my closest friends, right? In my adult life. And I'm talking about people because in my own perspective, the people you have around you, your support system that you're able to find in a company in a situation like this is like it's what changes everything, right? Now, because I'm a psychologist, I went to school for it. I've always understood and knew and studied to be that person, like for the value of being in therapy and taking care of your mental health and like what are the works that you have to do. So I've studied that, so I understand that. So I've always had therapy, so I've always had those conversations. But I learned over the years that that is not enough because that is, in a way, a lonely experience, right? And we are social beings, even though a lot of us are introverted. And even though the most introverted people, there is a level of socializing that is needed as a human person in this world, right? And that was the big game changing. I had great managers that are friends now that are able to be vulnerable, and I think that's the key point in terms of leadership and being a leader that connects with your team. It's that vulnerability. It's being able to be sincere about things. It's being able to be honest about things and have open conversations and create that closeness with your team. So it feels like if it's a safe space. So even if your manager needs to do something bad, it's literally not going to be a horrible thing. I had managers when I was laid off from a company last year, right? And I had my manager change kind of last minute. And then we were talking but because we were close friends, they literally told me like, I am telling you now, a few months before it happens, that we're going to lay you off. And it's basically a decision based on money. And that's the unfortunate truth. So I'm trying to fight to give you better options. So you can even have that conversation in a way that is like caring, right? So those were the best situations I had when I had managers that were open, when it was easy to discuss everything, when it became a peer-to-peer relationship where you understand that both of you have a different role. That person will make decisions about you, but you can make them together. You can talk about them together. They can be open and honest with you. And the second piece of that great experience is the people around you. So the people you have around you. One of the best teams that I worked with was in a very traditional company, full of rules, full of all these things that you had to do and people you could talk to and not talk to, and you have to have the leadership there to all that mess, all that thing that people love because they become a certain level and they're like, I only talk to people my level. I don't talk to you. Like, okay, so it was great because we had a team that was it was so fun to be in that team. We were so open with each other. It was so easy to have those conversations. It was like, we need to do this better. We need to do that better. Let's work together. Let's have fun here. Let's do this. Let's try to create here. Those are the best situations ever because although I was in an environment where it was horrible, that little team made everything worth it. It was a few months. I still miss that experience to this day. When we worked together as a team, that was also great as well because you create that support system. You create those people that are willing to take time out of their agenda to sit and talk to each other and say, how are you feeling? What's going on? Those little checkpoints to deal with the environment, which is also considered trauma bonding if we really want to be truthful about this, because working in a company is a little bit traumatic because unfortunately capitalism is a little predatory. So automatically join the workforce in disadvantage, right? But that's a bigger conversation. Now, those are the good moments, are the people that we find around us. And then there's the rare occasion where a company has a culture that is really trying its hardest to foster a positive experience for people. Those are the rarest occasions. Do not ever count on that. But if you're lucky enough to find a place that is more positive towards that and is really trying to make the difference, you feel it. You feel the experience. You feel it's better. You feel like it's fine for you to raise your voice and say, raise a concern or raise your hand, and say, hey, I don't like this. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. Da, da, da. And that's why I guess you and me can both agree with this, is that a lot of the times that happens, that sense of like, we're all here, we're all human, we're all learning, we're all trying our best, is when a company is smaller, because then it feels much easier to have those open and vulnerable conversations. And for some reason, a company grows, and then all the politics that kind of like known politics that we know starts happening, and that becomes like the bad thing. But in the end of the day, people, I know I gave lengthy answers, I'm aware. The end of the day, people, is the support system you have that helps you. Like my last company I worked for, that it was a bit of a traumatic experience, to be very honest with everyone. It was a whole thing. I had people that we literally had like, as we would call peer therapy every 15 days. So we would sit down and share how we were feeling and literally like hold space for each other's feelings. And that was like what saved me during that time, because I almost burned. I was like, in less than 6 months in that company, I almost burned out like that quick. So it was, and I'm not saying burnout as like people say, oh my God, I'm feel so burned out today. Like, oh my God, I'm so tired. No, that's being tired. Like actually burned out, like going to the point where my vision was foggy in a meeting, and I still don't remember that meeting to this day. I don't know what happened. I just know I was facilitating a performance committee, and I know it ended, and I know it started, and I know we made decisions. What were the decisions? I don't know. What was happening in front of me? I have no idea, because everything was just super foggy, because I was that stressed, because I was feeling wildly insecure. And feeling secure and feeling safe, even in the most unsafe of environments, is key, because there is part of this environment that should give you the safety, and there's a piece of you that can find that safety in that environment through the people around you, in the little group you have, whatever it is. But if in the end of the day, feeling more unsafe in the environment, or the unsafeness of the environment weighs more than the safety of the friendship you have, girl, leave, take your stuff and leave. Go find another job. It's better. It's better, because there's no company that is worthwhile our mental health and our quality of life. Yeah. Anyway.
So Renato, the conversation's been great so far, but I strongly believe that, we make the culture of a company ourselves as employees, right? You also mentioned that the groups of people, the teams and the individuals that you work with had a really huge impact on how your mental health was, and how it positively affected you, right? So um, I want to do this quick thing where, a lot of times us in HR departments, we like design performance processes, and we do like we create all these process workflows to evaluate people. So I would say let's switch things around a little bit, and see if we had to evaluate a workplace when it comes to um, being really mental health positive, what would be some of the things that we want to see there and would give them like an amazing rating? So maybe you can share one and then I can share another. And yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds fun. I would say my first one would be, for sure, clear rules of the game. And what do I mean by rules of the game? This goes from expectations, and it's a combination of clear expectations and culture, right? Because rules of the game, like what the company wants the culture to be, and are the rules clear? Why? Because if you have those two things clear, you know if you want to stay there. Like just knowing where you're putting yourself into is a big yes, because then I can make an informed decision if I want to stay or if I want to leave, because the rules are there, right? It's clear. Now it's your turn.
Yes, I think mine is a little bit, I'm copying you, but mine is a little bit more individual, like specific to me. I would be really comfortable from a mental health perspective if I knew what was exactly expected from me on the job. As in, I don't like people breaking down tasks for me. That's not what I want, because we're also growing in our careers and becoming more senior professionals. But I would like to know, at my position, at my level, what is expected from me and what are the things that I need to do to, let's say, go to the next level. I have always found it very mentally taxing for me when this has not been clear, because I don't know if I'm doing a good job or not. And I can imagine if someone else is in that situation, they would also feel that way. So instead of saying that I am insecure, I would prefer if people made it very clear that, this is what is expected from you, and there is less ambiguity, to be honest. Over to you, Renato.
I love that. I guess I share like 50% of that because sometimes I like some kind of free space to create some stuff. But I would say for me, I would, maybe this is a little bit more subjective, but I would look into, is vulnerability something that is catered, not catered, but is something that is celebrated from the top? So is the executive team of this company being vulnerable and sharing their vulnerabilities and being open about it? Is that being celebrated? That's the word that I was looking for. Is being vulnerable, showing vulnerability being celebrated? Because if top management is being vulnerable and showing their vulnerability and showing the things that they struggle with and they're going through a hard time and so on and so forth, it tends to trickle down. And I guess the point that I'm trying to get is, most likely I will have a manager that feels comfortable with vulnerability, because I'm a very open person about how I'm feeling, and I like to share how I'm dealing with stuff. My mental health, my mental process is very external. My way of dealing with emotions and situations, I generally talk them through, right? So having a space where a manager understands that if they're able to hold that space for me, my work and our relationship is going to be much better and much more comfortable. That's something that I'm looking after. But I'm generally looking at the top management first, because then I know that this is something that should be company wide, or this is something that could trickle down to the company. Because I know vulnerability is hard. It's really hard to know how to hold that space. It's not an easy skill to have.
But do you mean, Renato, like vulnerable from a personal perspective, or let's say being able to create transparency in the org? Is that what, like, can you be a little bit more specific on that with an example, maybe?
That's a great point. I'd say it's a little bit of both. I guess when I say vulnerability, I'm encompassing a combination of transparency, like say what you mean and say how you're feeling about things, and like open up about, this is how I deal with stuff and so on and so forth. And I guess there is a second aspect of it, which I think creates a sense of relatability between you and the people you're working with and your manager, which is sharing how you're feeling about stuff, in a way of, in a way that it's, I am feeling like this, I am dealing with this the way I feel, like I statements on how it's coming from my own perspective, and this is how I'm dealing with this. This is a good way for me to understand who you are and what you do and what you like and what you don't like as a person. So it helps me to understand and to feel comfortable to say, oh, this is how I deal with this situation, this sort of information, this sort of conflict, this sort of whatever. So that kind of like I statements, right? Because what a lot of people fall into the bad parts is kind of blaming the world around them about, things that are wrong, or like, I'm pissed about this. And I love knowing, what is your, like, where are you coming from? Like, I understand the environment is not great. For example, let's say this company is not doing a great job, but like, what is your perspective, point of view, preference, right? That's what I mean.
Makes sense. Yeah. I think it's my turn now. I think for me, it's also important that companies understand that they need to put in effort for all mental health topics. So I'm not directly talking about funding, but I'm talking about just the willingness to support. And you also mentioned like the executive team, right? I would say having an executive sponsor that believes in the use case for mental health and supports the organization. I would find it very hard to believe that no one has had a touch point with anything related to mental health in an executive team. That is just impossible for me to believe. Somebody has a friend, or somebody's read about it, or someone is interested in it or fascinated by it. So why not channelize that and have like a proper sponsor that can help like move the needle when it comes to mental health topics in the organizations. If I see that happening, that there are ERGs, or there is someone who's at least willing to support with it. And I think we both worked in an organization where we had someone like that. It was very, very powerful for us to have that. So yeah, that would be my point. Do you have another point, Renato? Over to you.
I would love to add on to what you said, if that's okay, because I
Yes,
think
sure.
you touched on very interesting things. I think there is a very clear case for companies to do their part in this, mostly because all the treatments for mental health, they are not they are not quick or effective enough as you would have for other sort of experiences, or like any sort of like other illnesses or whatever we experience as human beings, right? It's not as quick. It's a lengthy process for everyone. So whenever we're going through that, there's a lot of like, and I'm going to talk about money just to make the point. There's a lot of money that is being thrown away in a way because the person is going through their own stuff, as they should, and that's part of the human experience. But that means they are not at their, full potential. And that's the point that people should understand, that companies that love to talk about high performance. Oh my God, we are high performers. I'm gonna high performer. Yes, ma'am. We're all the performance. We're the best here, and we do everything. Part of that performance is also quality of mental health. If you're getting performance to the detriment of the people's mental health, you're losing money. Your reputation is like, you're losing reputation. You're going to be known for a bad place to work, even though, anyway, not going to get into what I was going to get into, but even though you can say you're an amazing place to work, you not necessarily truthfully are, because a lot of people are not compounding mental health and what they're doing into, is my person doing well, right? And not to blame them. Oh, you're not taking care of yourself, so that's why your performance is low. No, but like, what am I doing to facilitate and then get to your point of like the executive? A lot of the times, people that are become those voices of mental health inside of a company, they feel like they have to become the specialists, and it's fine to have an interest for it, like wanting to know more about it, like wanting to do something about it. But you're not a doctor nor a psychologist, not anything like that. You're not in that capacity. Your role is to facilitate the topic to exist in the company, is to open space for it, is to fund it as well sometimes, is to understand that there is a level of investment of time and opening up a space, right? And I feel like, and I wanted to add on that, because a lot of the times, those are the questions that people ask, like, what is my role? What am I supposed to do? Like, I want to do something, but I don't know where to start, right? So facilitating the topic, you will find at least one human being in your company who's really passionate about mental health and who wants to make sure that is happening, right? And I guess that goes back to, I don't know, because when I think about mental health, I think for me and from the perspective of mental health specifically, is the company investing in something? Is there anything? Like, is there at least a bare minimum? Is it even performative? Because a lot of the times it starts performative and then becomes genuine, because then they're like, oh, this actually is making people happy. Oh, things are actually getting better. Okay, so now I'm doing this in a genuine way because I've seen the value of it, right? The pressure of the market to do something about it transforms a lot of companies to do that first performative step, which is important. If it stays performative, then it loses its meaning. But if it starts performative and then becomes genuine, then that's great. So if they have like an employee assistance program where I can call and say, hey, like, that's today, in my opinion, that's kind of like the bare minimum. So those are the things that I'm looking for. Even like companies that say like, oh, I am a mental health positive company. We have all of these things. And then the things are like, you're looking at the health, the complete health of the employee, right? Like, are you making sure that you're getting the best out of them within their working hours, let's say, as basic as that, right? Are you offering people, like, are you facilitating people's access to a gym, to a therapist, to medical care? Are you facilitating access to that? Like, if you're facilitating access to all of this and you understand the impact that work has on mental health, and you're trying to ease that impact because it is part of the day-to-day, getting your mental health impacted by work, you're doing something to ease that impact. That, I would say, it's like, in today's environment, with the amount of information we have, with the amount of discussions we have with it, that would be a little bit of the ideal world. That means that you're doing a lot, and that means that most likely those conversations are open and held openly. Now, the challenge is, are you able to keep it? Are you able to keep them and transform them when things get tighter? Because when things get tighter, that's the first thing they cut it out. They cut those things out,
So and that should not be the case, right? Because when
it
things
should be
get
the
tighter,
complete opposite.
Yes, people need help when things get difficult. in the work environment, this is what people would really want to rely on. I'm taking a little bit different. I'm just going to a little bit different direction now, Renato, because you mentioned employee assistance programs. I have experience of looking for them and implementing them in different companies. And I was talking to two people that I work with who've also done the same. I think they are great, but for any of our Berlin startup people listening out there, I would just say, when you are launching it, make it very clear what people can use it for. They have a lot more than therapy going on there. They have coaching, they have meditation, they have different kinds of classes, or they look at the holistic well-being. There's some really good products out there in Berlin, I would say. So please, like, try to. I think one of the learnings I had for me was that it was difficult itself to bring this on board for a company, but it was very difficult to also make people understand what they can exactly use it for, because the level of like knowledge about mental health in general and about like therapy and what it means and what types of therapy and stuff is varying throughout the organization. So if you really want to have impact through it, make sure that you get a group of interesting people who are interested in the topic, who can promote it. And once people start using it, they see it as a way to like stay healthy. It's like going to the gym for your brain, right?
Yeah.
So please keep that in mind. I would also say, and also
Yeah.
like, let's come back to your point, like when things are going tough, especially in the economy that we are in, or we found ourselves, like, after the war, this should be one of the last things that anyone should cut off.
For sure.
Because at the end of the day, you just want someone to talk to sometimes, and
For
make you
sure.
feel that
And
it's not as bad as it actually looks like this, and you will get over it. You just need some reassurance. Sorry, go
and
on.
the long lasting impacts of those things, like, even though we are cutting this off, like the long lasting impact will impact the people around you, will impact your kids, will impact everyone. And then the effect that it has on a society is it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. So it's like you're doing your job to trying to hold it back and trying to offer people. You mentioned about Berlin people. I want to address my people back in Brazil and also in Latin American countries. And I would even dare to say here in the UK as well, considering the latest cost of living crisis, if you are able to help fund those things, I think making it clear on how to use them, that's super important, and what you can use them. But helping people fund, because that's a very cultural thing, due to the way economically a lot of the countries are in Latin America, and I can say from my own perspective from Brazil, if you can help people fund their therapy and so on, that's how I got through college. Like, the company that I worked paid for 80% of my college, and that's how I was able to get through college, because if it was different than that, that would have been a much dire situation in my family, money-wise. But because the company was paying that, even though the environment was not the best environment in the world, I was able to get something very relevant and important out of it. So I'm very grateful for that. So helping funding those people, because we're not going to fix the economical situation in 5 seconds. It's something that is very hard to change. So what you can do is help fund a lot of the things that were being done during the pandemic. And the companies in Brazil was like, we're going to pay for your therapy. We're going to give you, like, part of it, or at least X amount of stuff. Help people fund the things, because considering the situation, a lot of the times the vast majority of the people in your company do not have the money, or their salaries are all used up for their day-to-day stuff, and they barely have money to even like enjoy a weekend, so help them fund. I think that's
I
a
totally agree.
very powerful move that you can do.
Yeah.
And in the UK, however you can help, there's a lot of public resources, which I think is great here in the UK. And how else can you help people fund things like therapy, which it's a little bit harder access, which is something that really surprised me when I moved to Europe. It's so hard to access therapy here. If you have money, easy. If you don't have money, if you're trying to go through like other like the places where you don't spend money, or you get some sort of coverage or whatever, it's going to be nearly impossible, right? It's going to be super difficult, and it's going to be limited. And sometimes you need someone there all the time, and it's going to be like a limited, like a short period of stuff. So it is really like, help your people. Give them the resources. Don't be stingy. Don't be stingy on that, because that will come back to you.
Exactly. And you know what? There's always something you can do. Even in Germany, Getting access to therapy has been something that people have been complaining a lot about because it's very hard to do that. But I remember talking to some public health insurance company providers, and they were very happy to come and do a session and, kind of help with supporting, with how you can go ahead and get therapy, what are some ways to do that and everything. On the other hand, again, I'm repeating myself, but a lot of companies that I've seen, at least in the startup ecosystem, pay very easily. I'm think the price is probably different, but very easily for a gym membership, right? And this is some things like is considered as a standard benefit that people are provided. I would say let's do this a lot more. Let's put like employee assistance programs, therapies, whatever you want to call them. And a lot of local Berlin companies are also coming up with great products for this. So let's also start making that as a standard benefit that we want to give people. If we're taking care of people's physical health, we also need to kind of go the extra mile, I would say, as an employer for their mental health.
Adding to that, and I promise this is my last adding to that, I did a research when I was implementing a whole offering in one of the companies I worked for. And we hired this company to help us with that. And they did this very thorough research with like companies that would be the type of companies that I would say you and me talk to, which is that very much Berlin tech scene or like that place that we lived. The number one, like, because we were trying to understand what are the benefits that we're going to offer people, like what's going to be that offering. And the realization was, number one is base benefits. It doesn't matter how many pizza parties you have, how much cool food and cool swag you have in your company. If you barely don't offer a like a medical assistance program, like a health insurance or something, like if your basic benefits are not good, are not top notch, people will think everything else is bullshit. They're like, it's gonna be a TikTok, the TikTok jokes about another pizza party. That is very real, because it's like, take care of the basics first. And taking care of the basics first, you will be surprised how many people will be like, oh, it's actually an amazing company. Because mostly after the pandemic, people started realizing, oh, I need that basic support, because all the bells and whistles of everything, they disappeared. And now I cannot enjoy the bells and whistles, because now I'm needing the basics. And now people are realizing more and more that the basics are important. So offer the basics. So if you have a budget and you need to spend on something, spend on, or allow people to spend, or allow people to have a good health insurance, because that's where people will feel the safest. It just feels safe. It feels safe. And I can say from personal experience, and going back to our back and forth, that's like one thing that I look for. What are your base benefits? Do you have a good health insurance? I am really would be happy with a greater health insurance, because those are the basic things that then I don't have to worry about a few things anymore. Then if I have this good health insurance, if I had these helps, if I have help and benefits about my basic needs in my life, that's just gonna make me feel so much happier. And like, it's gonna make me feel comfortable. And then we can think about like the pizza parties and the fun things to do in the office, and maybe ordering some Domino's or whatever it is, like, just then that's great. But like the base benefits, and that's one of the reasons why I really the one of the positive reasons why I really loved the one of the positives of my last company. The base benefits were so strong compared to all the other companies I've been talking to here in the UK. They were so strong in terms of like, really like, we don't want our people to pay for anything in terms of gym, in terms of health insurance, in terms of dental plan. You're not going to pay anything. We're going to pay 100% for it, because we think you shouldn't be worried about this. And that is extremely powerful. And then I've been talking to other companies, and it's so interesting to see the things people expect you to accept, which is so interesting, right? Like, it's just like, help people out, like do the extra mile of the basics will make people happy, engaged, and they will come back to the office, because people really want other people to come back to the office, and they will be happy to come back to comply. So work on the basics, girl. Work on the basics. That's gonna be your main differentiator. And that's that on that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think a lot of times, the strategy is like you cut corners with these things because, oh, they're expensive, they're too much to implement and everything. And then you want to end up doing smaller things to like put a bandage over the wound, right? So if you're a smaller company that's thinking about what benefits to prioritize. Please listen to Renato. He's being really, really honest and logically. I've seen that research. Start with the basics about what are the most fundamental things that people would need so that they don't have to worry about all of that and they can be completely focused on doing their job, is what you hired them for, right? So I think we've had a great conversation so far, Renato. It was great to have
Thank you so much. And again, I'm sorry for my tangents.
No worries. I think this is a great. Yeah, I felt like I was working with you again, and we were in another meeting, discussing some strategic steps for the organization we're working for. But anyway, yeah, this has been great. I hope that a lot of our listeners will also contribute to this conversation, share their ideas. We will be also sharing links from the UK, from Brazil, and Germany, with information about getting access to mental health services. And we wish everyone a great rest of the week. And Renato, thanks again for being here.
Of course, thank you. I love being here. I love speaking and talking and speaking endlessly. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Renato. Bye, everyone.